Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Delighted to welcome you on behalf of ACCA. My name is Michael Shield. I'm the Business Relationship Manager here in Ireland. So we're delighted to bring this webinar to you today. Prepare to pass advanced taxation. Usually we do a lot of global webinars, so it's just so nice to have, I guess, more of a local flavour and one maybe unique for students studying the Irish variant of the ATX exam. So joining us today and giving the presentation is Paula Byrne, an ATX lecturer here in Ireland. We're delighted to have Paula joining us. Paula has put many successful students through the ATX exam. And you could say Paula's written that you could write a book on how to pass the ATX exam. And she actually has literally written the ACCA textbook on the ATX exam for Ireland. So we're just delighted to have someone with her expertise here to join us. So just before I hand it straight over to Paula, just some housekeeping. So there will be time for some questions and answers at the end. We'll keep everyone on mute just because of the numbers here. So if you wouldn't mind, just pop in your questions into the chat box. If you have any kind of technical questions, we might be able to answer on the chat box for you. And if you have any more heavy ATX related questions, Paula will loop around at the end and get to those. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Paula to take it from here. Over to you, Paula.
Thanks a million, Michael, and you're all very welcome. And just a big shout out to you, Michael. Michael is a phenomenal education manager for us here in Ireland and is always at the end of a LinkedIn message when I'm panicking on exam day if something doesn't work. He is phenomenal. So many thanks for all of your hard work, Michael. You really care about students. Unlike certain other professional accountancy bodies, ACCA really do care about their students. Anyhow, let me kick off today by talking about just in general our examiner. So our examiner, I was fortunate enough to meet him many years ago when we were launching the advanced tax book. A lovely man. But one thing about him is he writes a beautifully crafted exam question. Absolutely phenomenal. He's been our examiner since about 2012, so he knows what he's doing. And that's, the importance of doing past exam questions. Well, knowing that he has been the examiner since then, you can figure out what the steers are in the question if you get plenty of practice. So I am a big fan of his. Okay. So moving on, we have an hour today, and I was thinking that, what could I cover in 1 hour for you guys? So we're going to look at the general approach to the exam. And I know some of you here may be self-studiers, so I'm trying to take you guys into account as well. The professional marks, he is going to town on the professional marks. So they haven't been around that long. And if you look at older exam questions, you won't see any mention of the professional marks except in question 1. But now they're throughout the paper and there are an extra 20 marks for your professional marks, particularly commercial acumen. And anybody who read the examiner's comments from the December paper will know he really is putting a huge emphasis on these ethics marks. Now, the ethics have 5 marks and they will only be in question 1. Now, he's not convinced that we're really taking the ethics seriously. And I was going to mention the podcast at the end, but I'll mention it here. If you had listened to the ethics podcast, you would have been able to answer the December ethics question beautifully. Everything was covered, and indeed the June ethics question. So know your ethics. We'll have a little chat about them. Also, I suppose the main thing is when you go into the exam, right, and you look at the question, and you're trying to figure, hopefully you won't be in the situation where you're thinking, oh God, what's this all about? What's he asking me here? So I'm going to try and show you the tips, I suppose, in how to pick up what exactly the examiner is asking us. In particular, we'll have a deeper dive on the December 25 paper. Now, just in case you're not aware, this paper is very unlike any of the other strategic professional exams in that there's only two papers a year. So you've got the June sitting and you have the December sitting. And there isn't a backup paper. You know, the way in the other subjects, there might be a backup paper if something goes awry. So there's only two opportunities. So he sets two papers. So it's different, I think, for SBR that you might sit an entirely different paper to somebody sitting beside you in the exam hall. We all sit the exact same paper. Right. So with that in mind, if he has asked something in December 25, which is the last sitting, and we've answered it very, very well, will he ask it again in the following sitting? The examination, the ACCA people here probably won't like me saying this, but I doubt that he will, okay? But it is a good opportunity for us to go in and see how do we pick up the steers, because it's the same technique for whatever paper. And then at the end, then we shall ask, you can ask me any questions. You can ask me questions on exam technique, or you can ask me questions on maybe you might have some technical questions, and that's absolutely fine as well. And that's me, and that's who I am, and that's where I lecture. Okay. And that's a photograph of me that's touched up. So there you go. I don't look like that really. Okay, so let's have a look at the general approach. So the general approach, okay. So the first thing I suppose I want to say is to know your conditions. Know your conditions. Unbelievable. Know your conditions. And you might say to yourself, well, I've done other strategic professional exams and, you know, I listen to those fantastic lecturers and they say, oh, don't be learning things off by heart. You know, you have to internalize and understand everything. And with advanced tax, you have to know your conditions off by heart, your conditions of your tax reliefs. Okay. And by knowing your conditions, then you can spot in the exam question, what is he asking you? For example, he might say, oh, somebody is aged 55. So you might think, okay, so this might be a retirement relief question. So without you knowing your conditions off by heart, you won't be able to spot the steer, and indeed, you won't be able to answer the question. Now, just going to linger over this for a minute, because on the last examiner's report, he said we didn't know all of our conditions. And he said that twice in the same report. And I think, you know, let's say there's 5 conditions. And he said, you know what, it's not good enough just to know 3 conditions or 4 conditions. And oftentimes students will ask me, they'll say, Paula, if I knew 3 out of the 5 conditions, like how many marks would I get for that? You'd be very heavily penalised, because think about it. If somebody's coming to you for tax advice and you say, well, I know like 70% of it, you know, you have to know all of your conditions. Okay. The other thing I want to mention here is know your clawback period. So your conditions would be, for example, on retirement relief, there would be a 6-year clawback period, or business relief or agricultural relief. In other words, if you break the conditions within that period, well, then revenue will look for a repayment. And that's all about the commercial acumen side of the paper. So when you're advising somebody, you'll say, you know, Mary may qualify for retirement relief. And then you'll test for the conditions, then you'll do your calculation. But you'll give the unsolicited advice. You'll say, but you know what? Just be aware that there is a clawback on this if it's offloaded within 6 years. So that is equally as important. Okay, the Finance Act. So the Finance Act is 2024, and that is the Examinable Finance Act. And that is up to June 2027. And I don't think a lot of us are getting that message out there, because just talking to people, people are messaging me on LinkedIn and the like. So normally our Finance Act covers us for 2 sittings, June and December. So the best time traditionally to sit a tax exam in Ireland is June. Why? Because let's say you don't get through, you will get through, but let's say you don't get through, well then the December sitting is based on the same material, the same Finance Act. Now this time around, because of the changeover in the syllabus, kind of a result of that is that the material that we are studying now will do us for June, December, and the following June. Now, I don't want you to be thinking, oh, you just concentrate on getting through the exam in June, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you have old material, you need to invest in some up-to-date material. Now, we have 80 technical marks and 20 professional marks. 80 technical. Now, what do I mean by that? So he'll be asking you a question about a case study and advise the taxpayers, give the advice. And there'll be 80 marks going for that throughout the paper. And then the way you answer it, the way you approach it, that's the professional marks. And the steer by the education team is that, you don't need to be going in. It should be something natural that you will automatically answer it in that way. Okay. So the platform. Now, the platform is the ISS platform, and you should be practicing at this stage all of your questions on the ISS platform. Now, unfortunately, we don't have, just be careful, because any of the past papers that are up there will not be for the Finance Act 2024. So make sure you do get your hands on updated solutions so you can check for that. I would also say that just a little bit of advice for you here is to copy and paste the requirements into the word processor area, and therefore then you could possibly close down the requirements. And just to remind you that the tax tables are located in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen within the help section. And the tax tables are a replica of what is in the official material. It's an absolute replica of that. So you should be practicing with that material. And I'm sure it's up on the website somewhere. There is a little issue with the euro sign, and often students get a bit stressed about that. Don't be worried about it. Look, there is a tiny, tiny little glitch in the system, and they may well have ironed it out. So don't be getting obsessed with where is the euro symbol and it doesn't work, okay? It's grand. And he's actually come back in his examiner's report to be saying, it's grand, don't worry about it. So we won't worry about it. Okay. Now, the order of the questions. So what way are you going to do your questions? And that's something you need to have decided before you go into the exam. So decide it over the next couple of weeks, next week. Are you going to go in and just go question 1, 2, and 3? You have to do all 3 questions. So it is a personal choice. I find that some students will say, you know what? I'm not going to waste my time going in and reading every single question and then picking the best one. I'm going to just start at 1, then 2, and then 3. So what can happen though with question 1, because you have a lot of time for question 1, is that students can go over time in question 1, and then it's very squeezed for question 2 and question 3. So you could consider leaving question 1 until the end. Now, timing for your technical marks. And remember, there are 80 technical marks, and that works out at about 2.4 minutes per mark. So you have in all 195 minutes. So in overall 2.4 minutes. And again, this is another decision you need to have made before you go into the exam. So do you know the way, like in question one, for example, he'll have it broken down and maybe he'll say like your ethics is 5 marks. And then he might ask you something about CGT and that's 10 marks. And then there's another 5 marks. So it's up to you whether you go, okay, that's 10 marks multiplied by 2.4. So you could do it that way per, individual section of the question. Or you could say, right, there is so many marks going for question one, 50 marks, 40 of which are technical marks, and multiply the 40 by the 2.4 and do it that way. But whatever way you do it, do not go over time. Time is not your friend in the advanced tax paper. It is not, right? And it's been, there is a load of research on this, and it has been proven that you get more marks at the beginning of a question than you do at the end. So don't be chasing the last 1 mark. Move on, move on, move on. And that is all about question practice. Now, which response options should you use? And this is a question my own students ask me quite a bit. So you know the way you have your spreadsheet function and your word processing function. So in question one, to get the communication marks, you must write a letter, an email, a memorandum. You must write that in the word processor and refer the examining team to the appendices, not workings, appendices that will be contained in the spreadsheet function. And then you'll do all your calculations in the spreadsheet function, but then you'll bring in the resultant figure into the word processor. Mary, you have a CGT liability of 10,000. See Appendix 1. Okay, that's how you answer it. Now, however, for questions 2 and 3, it is up to you how you do it. And he'll even say in his question, he'll say within your chosen response option. So it's up to you to do it. It's up to you. Okay, so now I've had many a conversation with other tutors about this. And ideally, the easier way for them to mark it is for you to do your words in the word for questions 2 and 3 in the word section, and your calculations in the spreadsheet, and then toggle between the two. You can just say C workings 1, right? You can use the term workings for question 2 and 3. That is the way that they find easiest to answer. However, sometimes students, when time is not their friend and they've done mocks and they've practiced and practiced and practiced, but they can't seem to get the paper done within the required time. In that case, I would say, well, why don't you just do it all on the spreadsheet function and keep it all in the one response option? As long as it's easier, you have it all laid out nicely, that's absolutely fine as well. It's your chosen response option. The communication marks are in question 1. I've yet to see communication marks in question 2 and 3. Okay. Yeah, do I want to say anything else about that? No, I don't think so. Right, so when we have a look at our professional and our ethics marks. Okay, here we go. So we have, as you know, there's analysis and evaluation. We've got commercial acumen, gone to town on that, lads, gone to town on it. Skepticism and communication. Okay, so I'll do a deeper dive on the analysis and evaluation and the commercial acumen, because they're the areas that he's commented about. Now, skepticism, I suppose skepticism is, do we need further information? For example, in the December paper, there was some information given about 2 years, but maybe we needed more information. but he'll give you a steer in the question. Maybe somebody's unsure about something in the question. Maybe somebody has estimated something in the question. Don't fall into the trap of being skeptic about everything. So if he tells you that somebody is Irish resident, don't be, going, I wonder, are they Irish residents? So you'll be given a very clear steer of what to be skeptic about. Communication, and as I said just there, communication is in question 1. I have yet to see it in question 2 and 3. Now, communication is the format of your letter, and the letter or the memo or the email, the format will just be the way you learned it in school. Whatever you learned as a format of a letter, that is absolutely fine. Top and tail it. What do I mean by that? Further to your recent inquiry, I detail tax advice as required. That'll do you. Don't be going overboard, giving a big introduction, which you might do in the real world. You might say, oh, it was great to see you recently. Get in and get out of that introduction as quick as you can. And then tail it. What I mean by that is, should you require further information, do not hesitate to contact me. The other thing in question 1 is, as I said, make sure your workings are in your appendices or in your spreadsheet function. The other thing is headings. He loves a heading. I'm talking about the examiner like he's my best friend, and he probably doesn't know me from Adam. But anyway, he loves a heading. So maybe in part 1 of the question, you have to comment on Mary CGT. Put up the heading, Mary CGT. What else does he love in that? I think I've covered all the communication marks there. Now, then let's do the deeper dive now on the analysis and evaluation. So we've got 2 types of scenarios with the analysis and evaluation. So one would be to analyze and evaluate if a particular relief applies. And 2, the other type would be options, where he'll say, considering maybe setting up a trust now, considering setting up a trust when he's deceased, or maybe he's considering just not bothering with the trust and just waiting until he's deceased altogether. Now, if that is the case, right, so 2 different scenarios. Now, the first one, and this is one area which is a pet hate for him, which is, number 1, you need to know your conditions, but it's not good enough just to know your conditions and your clawback. You need to be able to apply it to a particular scenario. So how do we do that? Right, so here's a little example, a simple one. I'm a very simple person. So Tommy is aged 57 and he's thinking of passing his shares onto his son. He has already utilized his entrepreneur relief lifetime limit. Okay, so how do we answer this? So how we answer it is, we identify the taxpayer, Tommy. We identify what tax head is implicated here. He has a potential CGT liability. And then we identify, okay, what relief is this? I know all my conditions off by heart. And he's mentioned to me in the case study an age. He's mentioned to me that he is a director. And I've recognised all the conditions that he had sprinkled throughout the question about retirement relief. So tables. I love a table. They're super easy to mark. So you list your conditions. He must be at least age 55, must own at least 25% of the shares. So you list your conditions. Now, this is the simplest way, I think, to show application. I give my lovely heading, as they, being the conditions, apply to Tommy. Right. So you must be at least 55. Okay, Tommy is aged 57. So there you go. Absolutely. That shows application. He must own at least 25% of the shares. He owns 100% of the shares. And you go on and on and on with the rest of the conditions. And then that's your analysis and evaluating. I'm analyzing it, I'm evaluating. And at the end, I give my little, my evaluation, which is, yeah, he qualifies for retirement relief. Super, super important. All right. I think that is a much quicker way, and you can get in and out of that as quick as you can. Now, what's the other type of question? Now, type 2 question would be Mary needs advice on whether to gift now or leave shares in her will to Frank. Okay, so he gives options. And he'll have them normally. He'll go option 1, she's thinking about gifting now. Option 2, she's going to leave it to him in the will. And there are 3 steps to this. So step 1, do a little table where you've worked out all the figures, and you'll present it all in one place. So that's what a client would want to see. The client wants to see, okay, so option 1, CGT, option 2, CGT, and show the total. Step 1, you'll state obviously the cheapest one. So option A or B will be the cheapest one from a tax perspective. Or sometimes he'll want to know which gives the greatest net proceeds. Step 2, state the non-tax consideration, and that's your commercial acumen. Don't forget to do that. Sometimes he'll ask for it, sometimes he won't. And then step 3, don't forget to give the recommendation. Which one is it? Sometimes he'll say, can you think of another recommendation? Which he did in December. Okay, so this is just some figures that I made up. So don't be asking me where I got my figures from. I just made them up. So option 1 was make a gift. Okay, so there's a CGT liability, there's a stamp duty, and there is no CAT liability. And why would there not be a CAT liability? Well, because of the availability of the CGT offset. You know, the way you can offset CGT against CAT. And when you leave something in a will, there's no CGT and there's no stamp duty. So the way I would answer it is, I'd do the figures. I'd analyse it and give the reliefs. And then I'd say, option 2, if I leave in the will, is the cheaper option, mainly as a result of there being no CGT or stamp duty on death. And if option 1 was the cheapest, I would say option 1 is the cheapest, mainly as a result of the availability of the CGT offset. Now, my non-tax consideration is, it depends. So you'll be given a steer in the question. Frank is in dire need of funds now. He'll give you the steer, read it. What kind of a situation is Frank in? And then you'll give the recommendation. I would recommend whichever option because, and it's not always the cheapest option. For example, let's say here, I might say, you know what, Frank might get fed up. He might get fed up waiting for you to die because you're only young. You're only like 60. And therefore, you could be around for another, 25, 30 years. Frank could lose interest and leave the business. The other one that would be typically non-tax consideration would be if you give Frank the shares now in the business, well then Frank has a mentor, doesn't he? He has somebody that he can go to and ask questions about how to run the business. But if we're waiting until you're dead, well then he's nobody to ask. Commercial acumen examples, right? Commercial acumen, 2 types of scenarios. And the 2 types of scenarios are giving unsolicited advice. And how much is that going to cost? Now, the unsolicited advice, you can practice this in real life. And you might find when you're in like your revision phase, as you're in now, you're probably doing this already. I'm terrible. I have to stop myself doing this. So if I'm talking to somebody about their business, for example, I can't help it. I do say, and are you investing in a pension? I mean, it's none of my business. Why do I do that? But that's giving the unsolicited advice to the taxpayer in the question. That would be like clawback, for example. Or, do you know that there's a 6-year clawback? Do you know out of your threshold, for example, for threshold A, that you've already used up maybe 350,000 and you only have 50,000 left? Do you know in a termination payment, if that was in the question, that there's a lifetime limit of 200,000? And because you've already utilised 100,000, you only have 100,000 left. That's such useful information for them to get. And the other thing is, how much is it going to cost? Now, in the December 25 paper, and he really went to town on this. So be practicing this big time. And he even brings it into the ethical side of things. It's all over the paper. How much is it going to cost? So, for example, if you are taking on a new client, and let's say you're a small enough practice, but let's say that client is in competition with another client that you have, well, then strictly speaking, you should have like a barrier, an invisible barrier, what I would call a Chinese wall. You would have a Chinese, but that's two different teams. Like, how much is that going to cost? Another thing which I thought was interesting in the December, when we look at it now in a minute, is the new client came to you, and the previous accountants kind of fired her, and you're wondering, why was that? Did she not pay the bill? Can she pay us? So all real world stuff. So give the unsolicited advice. Okay, you must keep the shares for 6 years. Okay. That's a good one there as well. If the taxpayer is aged 54, you might say, would you not wait another year? And the other one is maybe, share buyback. You would say, if you could wait another year because you're supposed to have to have the shares for 5 years. So that kind of a thing. Okay, ethics. So not just the ethics for the 5 marks. So you need to know your ethics, but you also need to know about anti-money laundering. And again, bring in the commercial acumen into this. How much is it going to cost me? And I'm very proud of this particular podcast. I'm going to suggest just a few podcasts that you can listen to. And this one is the ethics podcast. You just Google, it's in Spotify. That's the Apple one. And that is just on the ethics. And there is no question on ethics you will not be able to answer if you have a listen to that. And also, I would point out that in the approved textbook, he does mention a lot of scenarios about it. He does have me include some examples on that. Okay, now what's next? Okay, so this is your ethics. Now, if you have done another exam at this stage, you will have your own way of remembering your ethics. Now, advanced tax is traditionally a subject that you keep kind of towards the end. But I know some of you loved tax so much that you made it the first one that you did, all right? So the way I remember it is I love that movie. That's the Wolf of Wall Street, the Wolf of Wall Street, and they're cold calling people to buy penny shares. So the way I remember it is I often cold call people. So I is integrity, O is objectivity, no conflicts of interest. C is competence. That's your skill set. Don't take on anything you don't have the competence to do. The other C is confidentiality. Keep your mouth shut. And not only keep your mouth shut when the client is your existing client, but even when they have left you, you cannot talk about old clients. And then your professional behavior, and that is in particular with your with your new clients. And don't be slagging off any other accountants. All right. So now the steers. So I suppose you go into the exam, all right? And I was just talking to one of my proofreaders last night who would have been an anxious type of person. And she said, you know what, Paula, what I do, I was talking to her about anxiety and the rise of anxiety, in the world today. And I said, do you have any advice and how did you find it? And she said, what I did was I kind of closed my eyes for 10 seconds and I really concentrated on my breathing. I took a deep breath, breathe in and breathe out. And she said, those 10 seconds that I took will not make one bit of difference in the overall timing of the exam. It's those 10 seconds that I took to myself won't make a difference. And she said, and then when I opened my eyes, I was ready to go. Okay, so I'm just passing on her fantastic advice. So the steers, how do we spot the steers in the exam? And the steers are, you're looking at the exam paper and you're thinking, oh God, what's he asking me here? What's this all about? So you cannot spot the steers unless you know the conditions. Now, will I tell you how an exam question is written? I'll tell you how it's written. What he would do is, this is me pretending I know him really, really well, but what he would do is he would say, okay, I haven't asked maybe share buyback in a number of years. So let me look at the conditions for that. Okay. So the conditions are, for example, they have to have owned the shares for 5 years. They have to be resident and ordinarily resident, etc. Right. So he is going to set a scenario about that, testing our knowledge on all of those areas. And if it is, so they're the conditions to qualify for CGT treatment. So he might well have maybe one taxpayer who qualifies for CGT treatment and one who doesn't, and they would be treated for income tax purposes. So that's worth knowing that if there are two taxpayers, wouldn't it be an awful waste of his time to have both of them qualifying for the same relief? So normally one will qualify and the other one won't. So he'll set it up that he'll say, okay, maybe I'll make it that one of them has left the country, but they would still qualify to be resident under the look back rule. So that's how he would design a question. So super important to know your conditions. Now, here are some examples. The age of the taxpayer. Why is he telling me? So when I said earlier, he writes a beautifully crafted question. What I mean by that is there is not one sentence that is superfluous. Superfluous, isn't that a lovely word? That's extra to what we need. There is not one sentence that we won't need to use. So don't ignore anything. You will ignore information at your peril. So if he tells you how old somebody is, you're probably thinking, right now, what's that all about? What condition, what relief has an age in it? Retirement relief? Young trained farmer relief? Dwelling house relief. So now, because you go in there knowing them really off by heart, you're thinking, okay, this is going to be about one of them. If you get a list of your shareholders and their shareholdings, so you might see, Barry, Frank, John and Susan, and they have 25% each. Why is he telling us that? Well, the steer with that would be that it's either going to be a close company question, or it could be a share buyback question, or it could be both. And you'll know that by knowing your conditions, but also practicing past questions. Maybe you've been given a list of companies and their shareholdings in another company. Well, that's going to be a group question, a group loss question, a capital group, or a consortium question. Somebody is non-dom, but they're Irish resident. So you need to know that the rules around that, and that is this is going to be a residency question, obviously, and you need to know about the remittance basis and constructive remittances and all sorts of fabulous things like that, and mixed fund bank accounts will probably come into it. Ooh, a list of errors in tax returns. Why would I care about something that happened a couple of years ago? It must be a revenue audit question. Shareholders not getting on. Why do I care? And he might have a whole paragraph about that, about shareholders not getting on. They're not getting on. There's dissent. There's decisions being made that aren't for the good of the company. What's that? Where? What? relief in the entire syllabus does that get mentioned? And that is, as I'm sure you all know, that is your share buyback. So will we have a look at the December 25 questions? Okay, so that's the solution. So let me get rid of that. And let me just put up here the questions. Now, here we go. Here we go. Now, I will answer questions at the end, and I'm going to go through this very, very quickly with you. All right, now, I'm hoping that you can all see that, and if you can, somebody is going to shout out that they can't see it. So I'm just assuming that you can. Okay, so this was question 1, and you should assume today's date. You will always find the date at the first part of the question, always. It's the first thing that he does. So now you know where to find that. In his earlier questions, if you look at older questions, he kind of sort of did it. But his more recent ones, he always does that. Now, you're a tax manager within a medium firm of accountants. And you and your tax partner have recently met Diane Wilson, who is a potential new client. And Diana is experiencing financial difficulties and she needs to act promptly. Okay, so any advice that we give her, we can't be giving her advice for something to do 5 years from now. She owes money. Okay, she wants to engage your firm to advise on the following areas. So the 3 areas are the CGT on the disposal of shares and how this liability might be minimized. So now I'm on high alert about that. Choosing the best of 3 available options in relation to a proposal from Marvin, a relation to assist her with her repayments, a debt write-off, and then something about a pension. Now, what I should say is there's 2 approaches here, and you decide, this is something else that you need to decide on. You need to decide on, do you go straight to the requirements or do you go straight to the case study? And that is a personal decision, right? There's no right or wrong, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm the type of person, I like to read the case study. So I'm picking up the steers, and it's, if you're not even going to do it in the exam, practice doing it when you're practicing your questions. And I'm going to try and pick up as many steers as I can so that when I get to the requirements, I go, I knew he was going to ask me that, and I kind of have the answer already formulated in my mind. Now, in relation to the, in addition, you've got some ethical implications in relation to the potential engagement of her as a new client. Okay, so here we go. Diane is single and she's age 49. Why is he telling me how old she is? So he's telling me she's too young for retirement relief. It may be a farmer question. I know it isn't because I've read this before. Or there may be a dwelling house implication. Or maybe he's just telling me that she's too young for retirement relief, if there is going to be an issue about that. She's resident and she's domiciled in Ireland. So if she's resident and domiciled in Ireland, well then, she'll be taxing her worldwide gains and the like. Now, look at this here. I've highlighted this. She's